Welcome everybody to the CSE Podcast, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Bryan Watson, Managing Director at CleanTech North. I'm James Black from the CSE, and we're going to be talking about C15. What is C15? And ultimately, what does this mean for public companies? This is Budget Implementation Act. This is something that was recently passed and is going to have a profound, at least potentially profound impact on public companies here in Canada. And I've got no better expert than Bryan here joining me today to talk about this and SR&ED tax credits and the wonderful world of funding public tech companies. So Bryan, welcome to the episode, and thanks for finally joining me.
Yeah, no, glad to be here after long last. And, we talked about this, I think when this was originally, these changes were initially actually announced, we were working on them well before they were announced in December 16, 2024. And we started talking about this, and well, it's not 2024 anymore. It's taken a little while. So I'm glad we're finally here.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's been obviously some changes in government and some legislation which was waiting for its day. And but here we are. And I know there's been a lot of, and I'll give credit to other exchanges as well in Canada. There's been a lot of support behind these new changes to the Act. And maybe just to talk quickly to the guests, because what we're really trying to exemplify here with this episode is that, the public companies, the public technology companies have been sort of deprived of some real advantages that have been in the domain of private sphere. And now this opens up a whole new world of tax credits for research. And so let's get back to the basics here. What happened in the bill? Who does it impact? And some of the real high level elements of this.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for this audience, we'll go through all of them. But for this audience, the biggest change is, as you alluded to, SR&ED, the R&D tax credit that's been around for more than 30 years now, has traditionally been much more beneficial to CCPCs, Canadian-controlled private companies. Private being the problem there for companies that are listed, and I've known many companies over the years that have had to go public. There wasn't the type of capital in Canada to fund their operations and their growth. But there was on the public market. So they went public. Makes sense. But they were always penalized by losing that refundability, that cash back nature of that SR&ED. And for literally decades, I've been asking the question, why should we penalize companies based on their source of capital? I can understand if a company's not Canadian controlled. I can understand if it's just listed on an exchange and it has no operations here. But why based on their source of capital, being private or public? And so that question actually resonated. And after a rather protracted but finally done process, that has now been changed. A lot of people thought that this had actually changed as of some of the votes that were going on around the budget in the House of Commons. But until that final royal assent, which was March 26th, it wasn't legal. The House of Commons had passed it, Senate hadn't, the Queen, King now hadn't assented to it. So it was not in the Income Tax Act. It is now revised because that has passed. So, it's been a long path, but as of now, companies, when they get the actual forms from CRA and various other things, will be able to claim effective December 16, 2024, which is interesting. So you can kind of back claim quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
Potentially. They'll be able to claim refundable SR&ED at a higher rate for something that's a new definition, ECPCs, so not Canadian-controlled private companies, eligible Canadian public companies, because why not make the acronym sound almost exactly alike?
So if you're private, you can still get it, but if you're public, you can now get it.
Now get that cash back feature, which is great because, again, early stage companies that have listed, they may not be seeing revenue for a decade. Well, if you're only giving them a tax credit, basically, that is a deduction off that first year tax owing year, It's nice. Don't get me wrong. It can be nice, but it certainly doesn't help fund the operations for those intervening 10 years. Think of a biotech company. Think of some of the companies on the critical minerals side and the processing side. I mean, they may not see their operations up and running, so they're in a taxable position for quite a long time. So this is really a game changer, and will really enable a lot of companies to not shy away from some of the public markets, because they're going to lose that refundable tax credit, which for many companies can be in up to a couple $1 million. That's material. So yeah, that's the biggest single change, and I can get into the other ones as well.
Yeah, we'll jump in that for sure, Bryan. I mean, it's non-dilutive too, in the sense that you're getting money back that you've already spent. You're not going into the markets and taking on new share capital, giving up a piece of the pie. At an early stage, when your valuation is, obviously the most exposed, because you're, in many cases, these companies are not huge, right?
Yep.
And so, and you're right, pre-public or public, a lot of companies are in the pre-revenue stage. And that obviously is, something where valuation is also a tricky proposition. Obviously, in the public, you have a public value, and that's cool. But to have this runway is what I call it, the added runway through this mechanism is phenomenal. I just want to ask a couple questions before we talk about eligibility and all that. But I'm looking here; it's 5 million eligible expenditures. Was that
6 now? So is it
6? Okay.
6 now. Yeah.
Okay. So that's. I feel like they might have even gone up. So 6
so the original proposition in the budget,
mm-hmm.
In the fall economic statement 2024, I believe was 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
And in the budget, they actually upped it to 6.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And over what period of time are companies allowed to?
Per year.
Per year.
Per year. So you're able to pull down the shred rates based on expenses up to 6 million versus 3 million prior to now.
Phenomenal. Okay. And when you talk about eligibility, maybe let's jump into that pool. The types of expenses, the types of companies that should be looking at this tool. Where would you start that thought process?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a great question. So we'll go back to the definition of shred, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Shred is based off pushing the bounds of particular types of technologies and getting into that realm where nobody really knows how to solve the problem. Or if they do, they're probably not going to tell you. Google might know how to solve your algorithm problems. They're probably not going to tell you. So you have to basically start running experiments. Now, that could be shop floor manufacturing experiments. We don't know how to make this particular food product dry in a way. So it could be food science. It could be statistical science. Any domain of science, classical science, social sciences, not so much, but any domain of science, engineering, where you are, where there's no known answer. So you have to really ask the questions of, you've done your research, you've gone out there, you've looked at the literature reviews, you've looked at, you've talked to the supplier of the technology, they've shrugged their shoulders and said, yeah, you're not supposed to use it that way, but you need to use it this way. Anything where you're pushing the bounds of those specific pieces of technology is usually grounds for starting a conversation of shred, where you take on a basically experimental process to try and solve that problem. It might involve bubble gum and duct tape. It might involve a bunch of engineers. It might involve a lot of rapid testing with software. Every industry is a little bit different. Software tends to be a lot of really rapid iteration. Drug discovery, usually not as rapid iteration. So, the timelines are different. It could be many, many years that you're in that experimental phase. But each year you can file, as long as you're documenting things properly, and we can talk about the documentation side later. But as long as you're substantiating your claim, as long as your work is eligible for shred, you're entitled, which is an important word. You're entitled to that refund. So it's not a grant where there's a bunch of folks sitting around in a back room saying, I like this company, or I like this one. No, as long as you qualify on the technology and you can substantiate the costs associated, you get that money, and it's enshrined in the tax code.
It sounds like a bottomless pit. but
well, it's initially about $4.5 billion. So, and I believe with the changes, the parliamentary budget officer has expanded that to by about 1.5 billion, I believe. So you're looking sort of 6-ish, 7.
Yeah, and I think in general we can agree that the more that's claimed against it, the better.
I mean, realistically, this should be funding the productive capacity building for Canadian companies. And it's interesting. One of the other aspects of these changes, reintroducing capital. I've got a number of folks in the academic and accounting world that we've seen a lot of commentary around Canada's overall productivity dropping, and some of them have correlated the numbers starting to drop as of when they removed capital from SR&ED in 2014. So about a decade ago, you can experiment with large equipment. You had to buy this and, it didn't work. You were taking technological risk and then it didn't work. Well, are you going to repeat that process over and over again? It's costly. Now, if that SR&ED at least generates a 40% tax credit on the capital cost, it mitigates the risk. And so, it'll be very interesting to see if we start seeing an uptick in Canadian productivity and investment in hard technology.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a narrative that we're losing out to other nations as far as that. Yeah. And this is a necessary step to help homebrew more, world-class technologies and train people and create new IP in Canada that has a global appeal, right? And keep the corporations here too. And frankly, from the CSE's perspective and from the public markets perspective, maintain more companies and attract more companies into the public listing sphere, and so they can access, public financing. And obviously everyone kind of hopefully does well under that construct.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we talked about eligibility in general sense. It sounds to me this is not just your typical science experiment company. This could be a operator that's like a mining company. They're looking for minerals, but they also have something as far as an equiment.
I've seen cavitation technologies to separate tailings ponds from critical minerals, building those technologies. I've seen, refining technologies, technology companies that have projects. So they actually have an active mine, and which isn't a criteria, but often it's the case that they are experimenting with technologies to get the optimal amount of whatever out of, say, a tailings pond, or companies that have extraction technologies. They're not public, but one like Destiny Copper, which has a very low energy extraction technology for copper. That's great. A, it's clean tech too, which I love because it reduces the amount of energy that it takes to smelt things out of rock. But B, it is a new technology that they're experimenting with and could lead the way for cleaner, greener copper without the rust.
Right. Now, in the realm of AI, I'm assuming this isn't something that you can leverage to go and hire an army of AI bots to do marketing campaigns, but something.
Not generally. I mean, there's probably some SR&ED in there somewhere, but no, SR&ED is based on primarily historically on the brains, salaries of folks that are and contractors, employees and contractors, all has to be in Canada. Basically, everybody's getting a T4, whether it's your company or the company that's contracted with. But now we're adding in some of those other expenses like capital and things like that.
So equipment.
Yep, capital equipment. So it could be a clean room for your drug discovery or medical technology company. A clean room might have to think about that, but there are some exceptions, like clean rooms. Buildings usually aren't eligible, but capital that is necessary to do the experimentation side.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
and an AI company, there's not the capital usually, but there is statistical science. So you might have 30 statistical scientists working on a whiz-bang algorithm to do something. Their salaries would be eligible, but they wouldn't necessarily have the capital component to their expense base.
That's incredible. And so, and as far as the tax credits are concerned, you've talked about the ability of these to be financed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So historically, so I've been working with a firm, Venbridge and Easley, and so Easley historically for the last number of years has been financing SR&ED. So that government receivable. The problem with this, the SR&ED is. And there's been other jurisdictions that have worked on this to do prepayments and various other things. But if I incur a big expense, I've got a December 31st year end, I incur a big expense Q1. Well, I can't file my taxes until December 31st of that year. So that's 8 months, 10 months. And even then, I'm not going to file my taxes in January generally. It'd be nice if everybody was that on the ball. It usually takes a good 3 months, sometimes 6, to get those taxes filed and audited and everything else. And this may be an increased issue with public companies because there's a little bit more diligence on that than private ones. So then you've incurred it in January. You didn't file your taxes till the next, let's be optimistic, end of March the next year. And then CRA has to review the file, possibly audit it. It might be, a year and a half, 2 years from when you incurred that expense to when you're getting the final check. So SR&ED financing historically has financed that on a quarterly basis. That's what Easley does, pulling that receivable forward, factoring that receivable from the government based on your SR&ED consultant generally that you're working with, the work that they're doing, whether it's Employment Hero or another one that they pull together all the salaries, they pull together the capital, they give an estimate to an Easley and say, look, this company, credibly, we've done the math, we've looked at their projects, they're probably going to get $500,000 in this quarter. So, depending on the lender, easily it's about 80% loan to value. So we could fund $400,000 of that. That means you can use that capital in that fiscal year rather than waiting 16 months, 18 months, to get that money out the other end. If you don't need the cash, let it sit there. But I don't know a lot of companies that don't need a little bit of liquid cash right now, even just to soak up some of the exogenous shocks that keep happening in the market these days. So
the market is unpredictable, yeah. But and again, to your point about the impact of public companies, and for sure, this conversation is going to be one of many that follow it around this and how to leverage it. But matter of disclosure, absolutely, you're taking on financing, but the the one thing the market likes is the less lumpiness in your financials, the better. And obviously in small cap, that's tough because there aren't, often consistent revenues amongst, especially an exploration company, there's no revenue. But certainly what you're trying to do is buy time. If you're a mining issuer, you're trying to buy more time on your property and more drill holes and more testing and results that you report back to the market, because that's sort of the ammunition you need to go and get financed. And then with the tech side, I mean, every story is different. We've seen these companies all have a different narrative, and the market shocks you mentioned, I mean, you could be in the blockchain space, you could be in crypto, you can be in AI, or a combination of all those. And sentiment
experiencing the SaaSpocalypse that's happening right now, or the newest one I've heard is the Assassination. There's lots of shocks out there, and having a little bit of flexibility in your cash to be able to absorb those, elasticity in there makes all the difference.
No, disruption is consistent. It's an oxymoron, but okay. And just a couple last points, Bryan, but making sure you're working with a reputable firm or someone knows what they're doing. You just mentioned it. So there's modeling, there's some prediction based on the financing side, but even just the application preparation. So what high level items should people be prepared to, be ready for when they go and file?
Yeah. So first off, the historic one, which is, generally salaries, that the work is all done in Canada. So if you've got contractors, have it in your contract that all work is done in Canada and that you own that SR&ED, just write it into the contract, keeps it simple. But then, further to that, what substantiates SR&ED is the amount of time that you are working, or your engineers or the people that are doing the shreddable work are doing shreddable things. You can have people that are doing front end on a software company, back end, and they're actually insane evil genius statisticians doing weird algorithms, but they're also doing the front end of the website, how it looks and everything else. The front end stuff generally not eligible. It's the creative, it's the that sort of stuff. The back end stuff, absolutely eligible. So having the timesheets. This is one of the reasons I like things like Employment Hero. They have the HR management system. They've got all the timesheets, so they got that evidence naturally generated. Yeah. And so you've got to be able to parse Tom's salary or Sally's salary between that eligible and non-eligible to a fairly granular degree. There's lots of methodologies for capturing that evidence, but you've got to substantiate that Tom and Sally are spending 42.6% and 37.8% of their time on SR&ED, and then that's multiplied through to the eligible expense base that has now grown in terms of 6 million versus 3, but you need to substantiate those expenses. On the capital side, introducing capital now, you need to be able to substantiate that the piece of capital, whatever the widget is that you needed to test your SR&ED, your hypothesis, test the solution to your problem, that capital is being used to a certain threshold. If it's 100%, you don't use it for anything else except to solve this problem, no problem. Just 100% shreddable. You get 40% credit on that, and you're good. But a lot of capital, that's not the case. It may be mixed use. So you need to substantiate, and even for the 100%, you need to be able to substantiate that it's 100%. And if it's not 100%, you need to substantiate between 50 and 100% or 50 and 90%. Is it 75%? If it falls below that 50% threshold, that is another treatment, and you may not be able to claim it. And it also impacts things like capital cost allowance and depreciation and various other things as well. So we won't get into the the accounting weeds of that. I'll leave that to my wonderful CPA Canada working group to get into that. But the crux of it is you need to be able to prove to CRA that you are documenting the experimental process, for one. Yeah. And then the amount of resources that are allocated to that experimental process to a fairly granular level, and just keeping a logbook, keeping the timesheets, those sorts of things are all good ways to substantiate that. So there's lots of literature out there. Happy to talk about it some other time. Other ways to document this stuff, but you need that because these are all subject to audit. They can be big numbers, and so CRA has been with, for example, the new clean economy tax credits, they're right now at a 100% audit rate because they were new. How are they going to treat the ECPCs and the capital cost claims? I don't know. It could be subject to a 100% audit rate. It might not be. We don't know yet. There's no stated policy right now. I'm hoping that it's not. I'm hoping that it's what's called a risk-based audit, where they look at it and assess whether there's a real risk here of fraud or not, and go from that. But we just don't know.
We just don't know. So just to recap, $4.5 billion are tagged in the budget
for SR&ED historically.
SR&ED.
Yep.
Yeah. Could be higher.
Yep.
Again, our hope is this provides more life to the public company sphere, in the sense that you've got companies that, again, every dollar counts, and every project, needs life in the form of funding. And this definitely gives runway to companies now that are in the public space that are doing these innovative projects. As we just discussed, there's other industries too. So I'm looking forward to it. This is just, we're just at the beginning now. Even though it's been a long process to get here, we're just at the beginning, Bryan. Any resources other than, I'll mention this, the article you wrote, it's on Beta Kit, came out yesterday, April 1st. It wasn't an April Fool's joke, which was even better. And the title of it, it's Canada's Budget Bill is Finally Law. Here's what that means for innovation. I'll put the link below. It's a great read. It's a good starter. Hopefully this conversation was a good starter. Bryan, anything else you want to mention on this before we leave you for the day?
No, I mean, I think really, the key is going to be working with folks that know what they're doing in this sphere. There's a lot of change. There's likely going to be audits. We've seen them with the clean economy tax credits, which some of your companies may want to take advantage of with the things like the clean technology manufacturing tax credits, which are eligible for critical minerals extraction and processing, so 30% refundable. So that's good. But we can do another session on those. But Honestly, I think the biggest key, and this has been the case for SR&ED forever, make sure you're working with a reputable firm that knows what they're doing, and make sure you keep your evidence, because there's nothing worse than, having gone for 3 years without an audit, and all of a sudden maybe you got a little lax on your evidence. That's the time when you're probably going to get audited. So you always want to make sure, because it's a material amount of money for a lot of companies. So keep that evidence, and stay tuned. We will be talking about any changes, how the audits are rolling out, things like that. And there are some moving targets. We have advocated for things like IP costs to be included in there, with potential clawbacks if the company's sold outside of Canada. So there are definitely some more changes potentially for the SR&ED program in the near future. So watch this space, and we'll certainly happily update you on any others.
That's great. Okay. Well, Bryan, thanks so much. That's Bryan Watson, Managing Director of CleanTech North, based sort of around Toronto.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking very soon, Bryan. Thanks again for joining me after all this time.
Wonderful to see you. Thank you very much. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.